Gildan Media presents Your Coach in a Box. Affordable, mind-enriching programs.
Superhubs: How the Financial Elite and Their Networks Rule Our World, by Sandra Navidi. Narrated by Katherine Fenton. Foreword by Nouriel Roubini, Professor of Economics and International Business, Stern School of Business, Co-founder, Chairman, and Chief Economist of Roubini Global Economics. I have known Sandra Navidi for several years, and have had the pleasure of working with her in my capacity as Chairman of Roubini Global Economics, a global macroeconomic research firm. Superhubs is a natural extension of Sandra's academic background and her vast professional experience in law, investment banking, macroeconomic consulting, and the media. In her capacity as an expert, insider, and observer, she has gained the respect and trust of the global industry leaders she writes about, and has obtained first-hand access to their international power circles. In interacting with and advising key industry players, Sandra has acquired a keen, almost intuitive understanding of how they think, communicate, and operate. These fascinating encounters with the global financial and economic policy elite, in combination with her knowledge of how the system operates, inspired her to apply the analytical framework of network science to the world of finance and global financial policy. By doing so, she shows how networks and their nuclei, the superhubs, drive our financial system, our economy, our economic and financial policies, and our society. Her personal anecdotes from the front lines of international finance provide important context and help familiarize readers with otherwise abstract concepts. By connecting the dots between theory and practice in an original way, and underpinning them with psychological, sociological, and anthropological explanations, she illuminates how human nature and systemic forces impact the course of history. While Sandra's in-depth analysis is substantiated by exhaustive research, she conveys her theories in an entertaining and user-friendly language, giving readers an intriguing insider's view of many exclusive networking platforms. Superhubs breaks down the complexity of networked systems into easily understandable parts, and while the focus is on finance, its sub-themes on network mechanics are applicable to virtually all areas of life. First, the book identifies and characterizes the most powerful people in global finance, economics, and economic and financial policy. It then exposes their interlocking relationships and their individual as well as collective influence on the system, for better or for worse. Moreover, Superhubs explores the links that connect them: money, information, and opportunities. It also offers insight into how mere mortals become masters of the universe, how they connect and transact within their own homogeneous circles, and why women struggle to seize a foothold in the executive ranks of the financial and business world. She also shows that the worlds of academia, economic policy, and global finance are interconnected as a number of individuals, throughout their careers, straddle these three interlocking networks, and have played varying key roles in several of them over their professional and business careers. Notably, Superhubs also uncovers how the elite and their networks contribute to systemic weaknesses, the overconcentration of economic and financial power, the widening income and wealth gap, gender and racial disparity, social fragmentation, and the overall systemic fragility, and how they affect all of us. And just as these phenomena are not independent of one another, neither are the networks that govern them. As in every other network, the overwhelming influence of a few key players makes our system increasingly imbalanced and unstable, and therefore susceptible to failure and disruption. This book provides an intimate glimpse into the obscure world of high finance and global economic policy, and while it will undoubtedly appeal to those outside of the inner circle, it should be voraciously consumed by anyone in business. Elite business schools often advertise their network potential to attract new students. However, they do not teach relationship and network building in their MBA programs. Superhubs ought to be prerequisite reading material, as it provides an indispensable primer in network science and a master course in the intangible art of networking. Sandra's balanced yet critical analysis of the financial power elite neither glorifies nor vilifies, nor does it absolve or blame. It warns that we must understand complex systems, not only to think differently, but also to pose different questions, because the longer the current unstable disequilibrium of power is allowed to exacerbate, the harder it will be to resolve, and kicking the can down the road will make such problems like rising inequality even worse. We should expect increasing national and global disruptions to come from technological innovations that are capital-intensive, skills-biased, and labor-saving. Growing trade and globalization trends challenge workers, firms, and entire industries and economies. Booms and bubbles lead to crashes, busts, and financial crises with severe economic and fiscal costs. And geopolitical conflicts become geoeconomic conflicts thanks to the rise and decline of global powers. Thus, enlightened policies are needed to reduce inequality and provide greater opportunities for more people. Otherwise, social and political instability will seriously rise over time within countries and across borders. Given their power and influence, superhubs, which increasingly connect the centers of economic, financial, and policy power, have a special responsibility to make the system fairer and stable. The alternative is economic, social, political, and geopolitical conflict and dystopia. There are other books about Wall Street, about the power elite, and about networks, but Superhubs uniquely combines these three aspects, along with thoughtful and thought-provoking critique from someone who has enough access within the network to acquire valuable information, and yet who is sufficiently outside of it to remain objective and reflective. Superhubs is an incredibly timely book, precisely because it's not only about the people within the system, but also about the system itself. The financial world can only be fully comprehended by understanding all three strands: how Wall Street and global financial policy making operates, the superhubs who push its levers, and the networks that form within it. This is not a passing phenomenon. Superhubs will always form within networks, making this an evergreen topic and an invaluable, insightful book for generations to come. Introduction. Genesis. Superhubs is the result of 4 years of research and the insights gained in the course of my work at the intersection of international law, finance, and the economy. As an attorney admitted to the New York and German bar, my professional journey began at Deloitte in Germany almost 2 decades ago, where I advised institutional clients such as insurance companies and pension funds on alternative investments. Subsequently, I moved to New York for a position as general counsel at an investment firm, then transitioned to investment banking and, lastly, worked with noted economist Nouriel Roubini at his global macroeconomic advisory firm before launching my own consultancy, Beyond Global. When I moved to New York, I had to proactively set out to develop connections. As I knew relatively little about networking and the world of finance, this was an organic rather than a strategic process. It was during this time that I came to wonder how a small number of executives, policymakers, and thought leaders managed to rise to the absolute top, lead their institutions to continuous success, and have unprecedented access to power. Eventually, my own connections evolved and began to extend to global leaders and other elite decision-makers. My work, which had begun at the micro level of individual transactions and culminated at the macro level of the global economy, has provided me with a bird's-eye view that has enabled me to recognize different patterns of network formation and certain behavioral principles. I began to realize that in a world where everything can be commoditized and automated, and in which human interactions are increasingly digitized, these select few preside over the most exclusive and powerful asset, a unique network of personal relationships that spans the globe, the cultivation of which cannot be delegated or outsourced. I have directly interacted with most of the superhubs written about in this book at invitation-only conferences and events which I routinely attend because of my work as a macroeconomic consultant and strategic relationship manager. About this book. Superhubs tells the story of our seemingly impervious financial system with a specific focus on the executives at its very top and their unique personal networks. It introduces the main protagonists, the superhubs, who pull the levers of finance and are by far the best connected and most powerful players. The narratives paint a picture of the human beings behind big institutions, capital, and macroeconomic events, their relationships, and their rarefied world of power, luxury, and privilege. Superhubs takes you behind the scenes to their exclusive platforms, the World Economic Forum, WEF, the meetings of the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and think tank gatherings, power lunches, charity events, and private parties. We learn how the superhubs' alpha personalities, inexorable quest for power, and desire to leave a legacy propel them to top network positions that come with access to unprecedented opportunities. We see the core characteristics most of them seem to share, such as a high degree of emotional intelligence, charisma, and charm. Molded by similar backgrounds within elite schools, the old boys network, and exclusive social circles, they understand and trust each other, form deep and resilient alliances, and employ their relational capital to maximize the return on their relationships. Superhubs also draws the curtain on the personal sacrifices, pressures, and struggles that come with power and privilege. Women are grossly underrepresented in the highest ranks of finance, despite the clear business case in their favor, because they are largely excluded from the predominantly male networks. Superhubs increase the efficiency of their networks exponentially by weaving a tightly knit fabric of relationships by way of the revolving door, lobbying, and campaign financing. Expulsion from these elite networks is exceedingly rare, but it does happen if legal, ethical, or societal rules are gravely violated, as in the case of the former chief of the IMF, Dominique Strauss-Kahn. Lastly, Superhubs examines the instability of the financial system by focusing on the interconnections of individuals rather than those of institutions, the consequences of this instability, and the measures that should be taken to make our system more resilient. The financial industry and the power of networks. Finance is the operating system of our society because it is essential for everything we do. Our dependence on it gives the captains of the financial industry pervasive power. Their decisions influence everything from industries to jobs, currencies, commodities, food prices, and much more. With their network power, people such as Jamie Dimon, CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase, Larry Fink, chairman and CEO of BlackRock, the largest asset management company in the world, and billionaire hedge fund honcho George Soros shape history, transform the world we live in, and determine the future of our financial system, economy, and society. Heads of central banks, such as the U.S. Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, and the Bank of England, directly impact the interest yield of our savings, the price of our mortgages, and the performance of our pension plans. Every action of any one of these financiers directly affects the lives of each and every one of us. Through their interconnections with the corporate sector, they increase their individual power exponentially. According to a study by the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, a select few financial institutions control a large part of the world's biggest companies through cross-holdings and board seats. Because financial institutions consist of individuals, this ownership structure provides these individuals with enormous influence. Applying the lens of network science. Systems thinking. Understanding our complex financial system can be an intellectually overwhelming exercise, and this book will make it more accessible by exploring the underlying personal relationship patterns through the lens of network science. Network science mathematically substantiates the structure and behavior of networks, thereby demonstrating how seemingly amorphous webs of relationships form. Networks consist of nodes, which are connected by pathways called links. All networks, whether natural or man-made, behave in the same manner. According to the law of preferential attachment, all nodes prefer to attach to other nodes with the most connections, because a greater number of connections increases the chances of individual survival. The best connected nodes at the center of networks are called superhubs. Superimposing network science onto the financial system allows us to see how people become superhubs by instrumentalizing status, access, and the transaction potential of social capital. As you will see, finance is a complex, self-organizing system, like an ant colony, for instance, where the interactions of individual players can produce large-scale effects. Yet individuals have no control over the whole system, as they themselves are subject to its laws and systemic forces. Recognizing the power of the elite few is all the more important, as there is no one controlling force, no real checks and balances. Physicist Stephen Hawking termed the 21st century the century of complexity. Indeed, technologization, financialization, and globalization have created a level of complexity that we have a hard time keeping up with. To tackle contemporary problems, traditional linear cause and effect thinking is of limited effectiveness. We should rather approach them with systems thinking, which focuses on the interlinked components of the entire system, particularly their connections. The superhubs of finance are amongst the most successful precisely because their advantageous position at the center affords them a wide-angle view, which enables them to see the system in its entirety. This superior perspective allows them to cultivate their extraordinary connections for tremendous actionable advantages. For instance, hedge fund magnate John Paulson made billions with a bet against the subprime mortgage market in 2007. Others, such as Larry Fink, Steve Schwartzman of the Blackstone Group, and Ray Dalio of Bridgewater Associates, have capitalized on their unique understanding by building billion-dollar fund empires. Crisis alert. Networks can be used as a force for good, but they can also have detrimental consequences. Interconnectedness is an indispensable component of our financial system because the exchange of goods and services for money, by its very nature, presupposes connections. In fact, our ability to cooperate within networks distinguishes us from other primates and has made us the most successful species on the planet, so much so that scientists have proposed calling our current time period the Anthropocene, the epoch of the human. However, over time, certain network dynamics, such as the rich get richer phenomenon and self-perpetuating feedback loops, will cause any system automatically to become more interconnected, homogeneous, and complex. Most systems are adaptive and self-correcting, so when they become too lopsided, circuit-breaking feedback loops kick in, restabilizing the system. Systems that fail to correct themselves ultimately self-destruct. As the events of 2007 and thereafter have shown, networks can trigger and exacerbate financial crises. Yet it is the people at the top, rather than abstract institutions, who make decisions with enormous implications for millions of lives. In order to optimize the system for themselves and their organizations, they build ever more personal connections, driving further technological and geographical interconnectedness, and thereby increasing complexity. Potentially corrective shocks, such as the most recent financial crisis, have so far not triggered the necessary circuit breakers because in an effort to protect their vested interests, superhubs have successfully resisted change. The resulting systemic fragility manifests itself in increasing opportunity, income, and wealth gaps and social corrosion. If the system does not self-correct and balance itself out, it will eventually become so lopsided that it will likely collapse. Author's note. This book, while being critical and raising controversial issues, is not a bank-bashing book. It seeks to provide a balanced and unbiased analysis of the network dynamics that govern the financial system as the result of the cooperation of a small number of people at the top, so that readers can form their own opinions. Naturally, since I am part of this world, my account is filtered through my experiences, but it is this perspective that I would like to share with you. By viewing the financial system through the lens of network science, zooming in on the connected elite with the most influence, I hope to inform and educate readers and stimulate a constructive discussion. Ideally, my approach will help empower readers to advocate for change and, taking a page from this book, to possibly build their own counter-networks to transform a skewed system into a more equitable and stable one. I have focused mainly on the U.S. financial industry because the Anglo-Saxon approach is still, at least for the time being, the dominant driver of global finance, while also taking into account international interconnections. Since the top executives are too numerous to mention, I have featured a select group with greater name recognition to make it easier for the general reader to relate. I use Superhubs as an umbrella term for the best connected people at the network's center, such as bank CEOs, fund managers, billionaire financiers, policymakers, and the like. While they have much in common, their relationships, pervasive network power, and high social standing, they differ greatly with regard to individual positions, personalities, and motivations. Accordingly, where applicable, I may only make reference to a specific group, whereas in other more general sections, I may use superhubs as a catch-all term. But what these superhubs all have in common is that they are human, and, as you will soon see, finance is, above all, a human system. Chapter 1. The Financial Universe, an Innately Human System. The Stratosphere of Power, Davos. It was a gray January day in New York. The frenzied holiday season had passed, the tourists departed, and the traffic deadlock dissolved. The city's famed energy seemed frozen, and its residents hibernating. I, however, was engaged in a flutter of activity, preparing for my most important trip of the year, to the World Economic Forum, WEF, in Davos, Switzerland. The exclusivity of the event and its high-profile attendees have shrouded Davos, as it has become known, in legend. Set in a small ski resort in the Swiss Alps, the annual meeting attracts 2,500 global leaders, including heads of state, billionaire investors, managers of trillion-dollar funds, multinational CEOs, and elite academics. There they discuss the world's most pressing challenges, cut deals, and, most importantly, network. Attendance is by invitation only, and competition over tickets is fierce. The conference has limited capacity, and every year people pull all kinds of strings and call in favors to be admitted, despite the steep price tag. I had first been invited based on my capital markets expertise. Among other contributions, I served on the Council on Systemic Financial Risk, co-authored a study on international financial reforms, and have subsequently remained engaged with the WEF network through the people and firms I have worked with over the years. Upon arrival at JFK Airport, I checked in at the provisional Swiss Airlines counter that had conveniently been established right beyond the revolving entry doors, exclusively for Davos travelers. Ground staff, clad in stylish dark gray uniforms, was particularly accommodative and eager to cater to this special clientele. The airport lounge was filled with a cross-section of Davos attendees. Here, George Soros; there, Credit Suisse CEO Brady Dugan; and in the back, Washington Post heiress Lally Weymouth. They, among many others, relaxed on the heavy leather armchairs, nibbling on delicatessen from the buffet to allow for uninterrupted sleep during the flight. The panoramic windows opened the views on the deepening dusk, and a fleet of planes featuring the red and white Swiss cross. Conversations among the passengers continued on the plane until seats were reclined and eye masks pulled down. 8 hours later, we disembarked in Zurich, where the highest-profile attendees rushed to their $10,000 helicopter rides. Bank executives were collected by shiny chauffeured cars, and I, along with the rest, boarded the WEF shuttle bus. The winding snowy mountain road was a bumper-to-bumper convoy of limousines, their passengers obscured behind darkly tinted windows. As we reached higher altitudes, the snow deepened, and powdered pine trees glistened in the sun. Almost 3 hours later, we arrived at the Alpine Resort. Any expectations that Davos might bear some resemblance to Thomas Mann's description of a timber chalet-dotted ski resort in his classic novel, The Magic Mountain, are doused as soon as the village's dull, flat-roofed concrete buildings come into sight. Luckily, most of the architectural eyesores are covered in snow and dressed up with large event banners announcing the WEF. Davos is a study in contrast. More basic than sophisticated, it presents a curiously juxtaposed backdrop for the power and riches of the participants. Many hotels are rather outdated. It's a bit like being caught in a time warp. Only a couple of years ago, rotary phones, which are particularly inconvenient when dialing lengthy international numbers, and faxes in the form of endless paper rolls were still the rule rather than the exception. Amenities generally taken for granted, like Wi-Fi, were more a function of luck than a matter of course, and the stoic Swiss hoteliers met complaints mostly with an indifferent shrug. Even the ultra-wealthy must tolerate rooms they would ordinarily consider below their standards. I once witnessed a billionaire complain, in an exasperated mien, that his room at the 5-star Steigenberger Belvedere was like a casket with a light attached to its lid. In the last couple of years, however, the village has grudgingly given in to progress. It now even features a futuristic luxury hotel, the Intercontinental, which is owned by Credit Suisse, and has been compared to a golden spaceship. Guests who prefer more privacy and space rent chalets. The prices start at $150,000 for the duration of the conference, not including staff. A friend of mine, a Swiss investor, rents out his enormous chalet to the Russian government every year because they pay him any price he asks. Other friends rent out their 2 luxury apartments for $6,000 each. I checked into my cozy, family-run hotel, a 15-minute walk from the conference center. Generally, the conference organization assigns hotels, and participants have little or no say in the decision. However, if attendees dole out extra money for a high-level membership, their chances of being assigned accommodations.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?